I'm not asking for a favor, Lydia, my father said, his voice sharp and colder than the distant memory I held of him. I'm asking you to do your job. The words cut deeper than I anticipated, slicing through the professional armor I'd built over years in the courtroom. I sat frozen, my fingers gripping the edge of my desk, staring at the man who'd been absent from my life for 22 years. His expression was unyielding, his tone a mix of authority and something else. Desperation, perhaps. I couldn't tell if it was anger or fear driving him, but either way, it unsettled me. My name is Lydia Bennett, I'm 33, and I'm a defense attorney with a reputation for tackling tough cases. Single, driven, my life revolves around dissecting evidence, crafting arguments, and seeking justice in a system that often feels stacked against it. But no case, no courtroom battle, could have prepared me for this moment. My father, Thomas Bennett, sitting across from me, demanding my help after abandoning my mother, Elena, and me when I was 9. Now, 2 decades later, he was here, not with an apology or an olive branch, but with a legal crisis and an expectation that I'd leap to his defense. You're asking me to represent you in court, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. Professional. But let's not pretend this is just about my job. You need my help, Dad, and you think you can walk in here after everything and demand it? He shifted in his chair, his tailored suit creasing slightly, but his gaze didn't waver. This isn't personal, Lydia. It's business. I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe you were the best person for this. Business. Of course he'd frame it that way. My father had always been transactional, relationships reduced to what they could offer him, what he could gain. Yet, there was a tremor in his voice, a fleeting hint of something deeper. Guilt, regret, or maybe just the weight of his predicament. I wasn't sure, and I didn't want to care. I need to think about it, I said, my tone firmer than I felt, inside. If you'll excuse me, I have other clients waiting. He nodded stiffly, rising and smoothing his jacket. Take your time, he said, though his eyes suggested urgency. But remember, Lydia, I'm fighting for my freedom here. As he left, the air in my office felt heavy, charged with the ghosts of our past. I stared at the empty chair, my mind a tangle of emotions. This wasn't just another case. It was him, the man who'd walked out, leaving my mother to scrape by, missing every milestone of my childhood, a shadow in my life until this moment. That night, I called Miriam, my mentor, and the closest thing to family since my mother's death 5 years ago. Pacing my apartment, the city skyline glittering outside, I poured out the story. He just showed up, Miriam, I said, my voice tight. No warning, no apology, just do your job. Like I owe him anything after what he did. Miriam's sigh crackled through the phone. Lydia, this is a lot to process, but you're a lawyer first. Can you separate your personal feelings from the professional responsibility? I stopped pacing, staring at the lights below. I don't know, I admitted. I'm not sure I have a choice. Over the next few days, I immersed myself in the case file my father had left. It was a disaster. He was accused of embezzling $12 million from his company, Bennett Capital, a mid-sized investment firm he'd co-founded. The evidence was damning. Bank transfers linked to his accounts, falsified financial reports, discrepancies that pointed directly to him. If I took this case, I'd be climbing a mountain with no clear path to the summit. But as I dug deeper, something felt off. The transactions were too precise, too orchestrated for my father. He'd always been impulsive, a man of grand gestures and reckless decisions, not the meticulous schemer this scheme required. My suspicions turned to his business partner, Victor Langston, whose name appeared in several key documents. The more I investigated, the more I saw a pattern. Victor stood to gain significantly if my father took the fall, positioning himself to take full control of Bennett Capital. It was a hunch, not proof, but it planted a seed of doubt I couldn't ignore. Late one night, after hours of sifting through records, I called Miriam again. This case doesn't add up, I said, my voice low but urgent. I think someone set him up, maybe Victor Langston. Miriam was silent for a moment. Lydia, if you're right, you're not just defending your father. You're exposing a conspiracy. Are you prepared for what that entails? I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I don't know if I'm ready, but I think I have to do this. The next morning, I called my father and agreed to take the case, but on my terms. I'm running this my way, I told him. No interference, no lies. If I find out you're holding back, I'm out. To my surprise, he agreed without hesitation, though his voice carried a strain that suggested he knew the stakes. I trust you, Lydia, he said, words that felt hollow given our history. Preparing for the first hearing was a marathon. I combed through years of financial records, interviewed Bennett Capital employees, and worked to construct a defense that didn't paint my father as a thief. All the while, I grappled with my emotions. Defending him felt like betraying the little girl who'd waited for a father who never returned. Yet I couldn't shake the need to uncover the truth. Not just for him, but for myself. Our first strategy, meeting in my office, was tense. He sat across from me, his posture rigid, his eyes occasionally softening when he thought I wasn't looking. I kept it professional, outlining our approach and what I needed from him, but then he broke the silence. "You're impressive," he said, almost reluctantly. "I didn't expect this confidence." I paused, unsure whether to take it as praise or a backhanded jab. "I've been doing this for years," I replied evenly. "It's what I do." He nodded, and we returned to the case, but his words lingered, a crack in the wall between us. As weeks passed, the case took shape, though challenges mounted. Victor Langston was elusive, his deposition a masterclass in evasion, carefully worded, answers that subtly implicated my father while shielding himself. The pressure grew, both in the courtroom and within me. One evening, after a grueling day of legal sparring, I met Miriam for coffee at a quiet diner. "He's a difficult client," I admitted, stirring my latte. "Half the time, I feel like he's hiding something. The other half, he seems genuinely scared." Miriam sipped her tea, her gaze thoughtful. "Family complicates everything, Lydia. They're not just clients. They're a reflection of your past. Every interaction carries the weight of history. But you're doing the right thing, pursuing the truth." Her words grounded me as the trial loomed. The deeper I dove into the case, the more I realized its stakes extended beyond my father's freedom. This was about proving I could rise above our fractured past, that I could uphold justice despite the personal cost. During a late-night meeting, the tension between us erupted. We were reviewing a timeline of suspicious transactions when I caught him staring out the window, his mind clearly elsewhere. "Something on your mind?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. He hesitated, then shook his head. "Just thinking." I set my pen down, leaning back. "Thinking about what? How you landed in this mess, or how you walked out on Mom and me when I was 9? The words came out sharper than intended, but I didn't retract them. He looked startled, as if I'd struck a nerve he wasn't prepared to face. "Lydia, he began, but I cut him off. "No, don't dodge this," I said, my voice steady but firm. "You left us. No note, no explanation. Mom worked herself to death to keep us afloat, and I grew up wondering what I did wrong. Now, you show up, not to make amends, but because you need me. Do you even care what that feels like?" His face tightened, and for a moment, I thought he'd deflect. But then he sighed, his shoulders slumping. "You're right," he said quietly. "I don't have an excuse. I was selfish, scared, a failure as a father. I thought staying away was better for you both." "Better?" I said, my voice trembling. "Mom cried herself to sleep. I spent years thinking I wasn't enough. That was your idea of better?" He nodded, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I know I failed you. I regret it every day. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm here now, and I'm grateful you're giving me a chance, even if it's just in court." His admission disarmed me. I'd spent years rehearsing what I'd say if I ever faced him, but I hadn't expected this raw honesty. "I don't understand why I'm doing this," I said, my voice softer but still edged with frustration. "After everything, why am I helping you?" He looked at me, his eyes carrying a weight I hadn't seen before. Maybe because you're better than me, he said softly. You could have turned me away, and no one would have blamed you, but you didn't. You're fighting for the truth, even when it's hard. That's something I never had the courage to do. I stared at him, his words stirring a mix of anger and unease. That's not an answer, I said, though his sincerity had shaken me. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing my job. He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Maybe, but you're doing it with a kind of integrity I lost a long time ago. You care about what's right, even when it hurts. I leaned forward, my eyes narrowing. Integrity? Are you saying you're guilty of this too? His expression hardened, and he shook his head firmly. No, Lydia. I didn't do what they're accusing me of. I've made plenty of mistakes, but I didn't steal from my company. I'm not a thief. I studied him, searching for deception. His tone carried a desperate conviction, and for the first time I believed him, at least about the embezzlement. Then why does the evidence point to you? I asked. The transfers, the records, they all lead back to your name. That's what I'm trying to figure out, he said, his voice rising with frustration. Someone set me up, Lydia. I know it looks bad, but I need you to believe me. A flicker of pity stirred, but I pushed it down. You better hope. I can prove that, I said, standing, because if you're lying, I won't protect you. Over the next few weeks, I poured myself into the case, determined to uncover the truth. Victor Langston's name kept surfacing, his involvement subtle but persistent. He'd been quietly consolidating power at Bennett Capital, transferring assets to personal accounts while my father faced scrutiny. If Victor was behind this, he'd covered his tracks well, but I was determined to find the crack in his armor. During a strategy session, I laid out my findings. Victor had access to the accounts, the records, everything, I said, pointing to a detailed timeline. He's been distancing himself from the company for months, liquidating assets and hiding them in offshore holdings. If we can prove he had motive and opportunity, we can shift the narrative. My father listened intently, his usual guarded demeanor softened by a rare focus. You really think he's behind this? He asked, his voice cautious. I do, I said, but it's not about what I think. It's about what I can prove. Victor's smart, and he's not going to make this easy. The breakthrough came during a pre-trial deposition with one of Victor's senior managers, Claire Thornton. Her initial testimony was polished, her answers aligning with Victor's narrative of my father's negligence. But as I pressed her on Victor's role, her composure faltered, her eyes darted to the door, her voice catching slightly. Ms. Thornton, I said, my tone calm but pointed, is there anything you'd like to share about Mr. Langston's involvement? Anything you've seen or heard that might clarify these discrepancies? She hesitated, her hands twisting in her lap. The room was silent, the court reporter's pen the only sound. Then with a shaky breath she spoke. A few months ago, I overheard Mr. Langston on a call, she said, her voice barely audible. He said, Thomas is the perfect fall guy. No one will question it. The words landed like a grenade, the room buzzing with stifled gasps. I glanced at my co-counsel, keeping my expression neutral. Did you report this at the time? I asked. Claire shook her head. I didn't think it was my place, but it's been eating at me. I didn't know if it mattered until now. Her testimony was a critical piece, but I knew it wasn't enough. Hearsay could be dismissed, and Victor's legal team would pounce on any weakness. I thanked Claire and promised to follow up, my mind already racing to the next step. That evening, I met with our IT forensic analyst, Jamal, who'd been scouring digital records for weeks. We're close, Jamal said, his laptop screen casting a glow across his face. I've been digging through deleted email archives, and there are still some backup files I haven't cracked. If Victor left a trail, it's in there. The wait was agonizing, but I clung to hope that the truth was buried in those files. 3 days later, Jamal called, his voice electric with excitement. Lydia, I found it, he said. An email. Victor sent to an offshore accountant. He deleted it, but the backup server preserved a copy. The timestamp aligns with the financial discrepancies. My heart raced. What does it say? He read it aloud. The structure ensures Thomas takes the hit if this unravels. Keep your end clean. It's deliberate, Lydia, and the IP address matches Victor's office computer. He can't deny it's his. I exhaled, relief flooding me. This is it, Jamal. This is the proof we need. The email, combined with Claire's testimony, gave us a solid foundation. But the real challenge lay ahead, presenting it in court and dismantling Victor's carefully crafted facade. The day of the pivotal hearing arrived, the courtroom charged with anticipation. My father sat beside me, unusually quiet, his face a mix of nerves and hope. I arranged my notes, the email and deposition transcripts neatly stacked, and took a deep breath to steady myself. The prosecution painted my father as a reckless opportunist, a man whose greed had tanked his company. I waited patiently, my focus unwavering. When my turn came, I stood, holding the email copy. Your Honor, I began, my voice clear and confident. We have new evidence that shifts the focus of this case. It directly implicates Victor Langston in a calculated effort to frame my client, Thomas Bennett, the courtroom murmured, as I distributed copies to the judge and opposing counsel. This email, retrieved from a backup server after Mr. Langston attempted to delete it, outlines his plan to pin the financial discrepancies on my client, I continued. It states, the structure ensures Thomas takes the hit if this unravels. Furthermore, we have testimony from a senior manager who overheard Mr. Langston refer to my client as the perfect fall guy. I paused, letting the evidence sink in. This isn't a case of negligence or greed on my client's part. It's a deliberate scheme by Mr. Langston to deflect responsibility and seize control of Bennett Capital. Victor shifted in his seat, his polished demeanor cracking as he whispered urgently to his attorney. My father looked at me, his eyes carrying a quiet respect I hadn't seen before. The judge reviewed the evidence, her expression unreadable, and after closing arguments, she struck her gavel. The court finds sufficient grounds to redirect this investigation toward Mr. Victor Langston, she declared. The case against Thomas Bennett is adjourned pending further review of this new evidence. A ripple of murmurs filled the room. My father turned to me, his expression a mix of relief and something deeper. Gratitude, perhaps. He didn't speak, but his nod said enough. In the days that followed, the charges against my father were dropped, and the investigation pivoted to Victor, whose empire began to crumble under scrutiny. Headlines blared, Bennett Capital scandal, partners' betrayal exposed. For my father, it was vindication, but for me, the victory was bittersweet. Clearing his name had been my goal, but it had also forced me to confront the pain of his absence. The BI. Evening after the case was dismissed, my father asked to meet at my office. His tone on the phone was softer, almost hesitant, and when he arrived, he looked different, less guarded, more human. He sat across from me, the silence stretching, as he searched for words. I need to thank you, he said finally, his voice low. Not just for the case, but for doing it despite everything I put you through. I don't deserve what you did. I leaned back, arms crossed. You don't have to thank me. I did my job. He flinched slightly but pressed on. You did more than that, Lydia. You saved me, even when you had every reason to walk away. I'm proud of you. Not that I have the right to say that. His words stirred a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, a faint ache for what might have been. I didn't need your pride, I said, my voice steady. I needed a father. I needed you when Mom was working herself to death, when I was figuring out who I was. You weren't there, and no courtroom victory changes that. He nodded, his eyes glistening. I know. I wish I could undo it, but I can't. All I can do is tell you how sorry I am and how much I admire the woman you've become. I looked away, the weight of his apology heavy. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said honestly. Maybe I never will, but I took this case to prove something to myself, that I'm stronger than the pain you left behind. And I am. He swallowed hard, nodding. I hope someday you'll see that I'm trying to be better, even if it's too late. I didn't respond, letting the silence speak. As he left, I stayed in my office, the quiet wrapping around me like a shield. I wasn't the 9-year-old girl he'd abandoned anymore. I was Lydia Bennett, a woman who'd fought for truth and emerged whole, not because of him, but despite him. In the months that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. My reputation as a lawyer grew, the Bennett Capital case earning me respect in legal circles. I took on new clients, each case a chance to hone my craft, but I carried the lessons of my father's case with me. Justice wasn't just about winning. It was about integrity, even when it hurt. Miriam and I met regularly, her wisdom a steady guide. One evening, over wine at her cozy townhouse, she raised a glass. "To you, Lydia," she said, smiling. "You faced your past and came out stronger. Not many could do that." I clinked my glass against hers, a small smile tugging at my lips. I had a good teacher. My father reached out occasionally, sending tentative emails or leaving voicemails. I responded sparingly, keeping my distance. Forgiveness wasn't a switch I could flip, but I no longer felt the need to carry his absence like a wound. I'd proven my strength to him and to myself. One spring afternoon, as I reviewed case files in my office, a photo on my desk caught my eye. Me and my mother, laughing at a park when I was a teenager. Her strength had carried me through his absence, and though she was gone, her love still anchored me. I smiled, setting the photo down. The road ahead was mine to shape, and I was ready for whatever it brought.